We need housing. We need people. Bottom line, we need people. I like to compare us with New Hampshire. If we had the population density that New Hampshire has, and no one can say New Hampshire is overflowing with people. Maine would have 4.5 million people right now. Auburn would have 80,000 people.
That's an interesting stat, and it's only not that way because of lack of housing, really.
It's a lack of housing. It's a lack of opportunities. And the cart and the horse really come into play here too. We will have more opportunities when we have more people.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot, of Pouliot Real Estate, each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. Here today, I'm joined with Jason Levesque, former Mayor of Auburn, successful entrepreneur, recovering now politician. Thrilled to have you joining us today on the Housing Matters podcast, Jason. Why don't you tell the viewers or the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you're here in Central Maine?
Well, most recently, I just had a beautiful lunch over at Cushnock.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, by the way.
You're welcome.
I didn't know I was doing a podcast, but okay, so here we are. Background, I grew up in Maine. I grew up in Auburn and, went to high school at Edward Little. After I graduated, I went to college in West Virginia. It was great, too great, to the point where after 2 years, I'm like, I need to settle down a little bit, and I joined the U.S. Army. Did that for 8 years. Great. Infantry, enlisted. It was exactly what I needed in life. Taught me a lot of great lessons. Grounded me, really, and showed me a lot about the world. Came back to Maine, and I just started, bouncing around and trying to find out what I was good at. Went back to school at University of Southern Maine. Then I ended up in marketing. And fast forward a little bit, I opened my own marketing firm in 2004 called Argo Marketing Group.
Argo?
Yeah, and I in my living room, really on my couch.
What's the name? Why Argo?
Well, I'm half Greek and half French, and I was raised on Greek mythology. So Jason, my first name, and the Argonauts, right? Everybody knows that story, the search for the Golden Fleece. The name of their boat was the Argo, which, and by definition, is a ship designed to carry you on great, fantastic adventures and, searches for wealth and fame and so forth. So I'm like, it fit. When I was a kid, I'm like, if I ever had a company, it could be Argo Plumbing or Argo something, contracting, whatever it was. So it just kind of fit with Argo Marketing. And
I love that. And I'm glad that you told me, because until now, I thought it was just named after one of those Argos that you get in with the 6 wheels. That's like a boat ATV that goes in the water or the land.
I tried doing that for copyright infringement.
It's very versatile, so he wants that.
No. My grandfather had one growing up, which is ironic. And those things are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
They really are, but no relation to that whatsoever.
Interesting.
So it's all about a boat. And the whole company's theme was a ship, an ancient Greek trireme. So
I didn't know that. And shame on me, I actually don't know of that allegory, that story either. I'm going to have to...
I'll send you a copy.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a great story.
So from military to entrepreneurship, how would you say... we've had some guests on before. We've had a background in military. George, actually, who was one of our first guests, had spent some time in Vietnam kind of building bridges, and learned a lot from that experience. And I'm curious, what you learned in the military, how has that helped out in the business front and with leadership?
Well, the military is nothing but a leadership laboratory. And you're part of a team right from the get-go. Small teams, a rifle squad, if you would, okay, or a rifle team, and then you move up, and it's a meritocracy. So the better you do, the more advancement you get, which is a great lesson. It's wonderful, isn't it? And so, within that meritocracy, I kept moving up, and then all of a sudden you get a leadership position of your own, small team leadership position, and then you can move up and have more responsibilities, bigger teams. But at the end of the day, it's still about leading small teams. And they're just different numbers of small teams at a certain point. So I took all those lessons and applied it to everything I did afterwards. Really, not intentionally. It just, that's the only thing I knew. And it worked. And when I started my company, it was just me. And then I had a small team. I kept hiring a person here, a person there, and then 100 people, and 300, and then 600. But it still had small team feels because everybody was structured like you would structure a military organization.
Yeah. And how many employees did you have kind of at the end? Because you sold the business,
I did.
right?
Yeah, I sold it. I sold the business in 2018. And at that point, I had around 550 employees in 3 locations in Maine, a location in Georgia, and a location out in Bogota, Colombia.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have been fun to go visit.
It was interesting. And it was interesting because they're all American expats, sort of. They're actually, a lot of people talk about, not to interject modern or current national politics, but that the current president, President Trump, is deporting so many people. Actually, the president who deported the most people in recent memory was President Obama. And when Colombia became safe, their civil war was called to an end, there were tens of thousands of Colombian nationals who were living in America that were deported. And these people were living in America since the age of 5, 6. Now they're in their 20s and 30s, and they're going back to Bogota. Great employees because they're bilingual. And it was such a wonderful environment to be in because they were grateful. They were hardworking people. And I kept thinking, I'm like, I wish we still had them here in America. But they did well for us.
So through the military, you were a drill instructor too, weren't you?
I was drill sergeant, right, for the last 3 years.
What does that entail? Besides yelling at people.
You know, that's the common myth, right? There is yelling that goes on, without a doubt. There is a lot of physical punishment, self-induced, if you would. In other words, push-ups, sit-ups, go until I get tired. But really, it's about mentoring.
Did you do the push-ups with them?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Mostly not. Mostly not. I didn't need to punish myself. But if I did, I would.
Yeah.
And that did happen. But no, it's really about mentoring small teams. It's about bringing someone who wants to be there and showing them the way, showing them really best practices, and then encouraging that. And that's really what the job is. It's not about yelling and screaming and destroying someone's personality. You want that. You want them to bring what they've learned through life and just be able to focus it in a productive fashion to help the team.
It makes a lot of sense. So you went, you were mayor of Auburn, and through that process, you really, I think, were very focused on trying to streamline processes and bring about this kind of mindset, this business entrepreneur mindset, but also, parts of the military as well with structure to what was going on in Auburn. And I'll recall one time I went down to meet when you were mayor with your economic development director. And I remember the reason I was meeting with them was I was considering I wanted to do a project in Auburn and what would it be like to do business with Auburn. And I got to be honest with you, it was like they rolled out the red carpet in terms of, hey, come and meet with us. We have this room set up. We have posters all over the walls about what our vision is, which is something that's very lacking in municipal government, I find, is a sense of vision around a shared purpose, which for you was, hey, how can we bring about more economic vitality? But we know we need to do that with housing, and it seemed like there was really full steam ahead on that front. Yet at the same time, that was kind of like a little bit controversial for people in Auburn, right? Change is always difficult. It's never easy to be the change agent, to be the leader that's trying to affect that change. It always seems 20 years later when it's all working out, everyone's like, oh, yeah, it was a great idea. But in the moment, it's tough. Can you talk a little bit about why, that was your approach to real estate development? And also, how do you balance that in terms of, what the public really says that they want, which is in this case more housing, with this issue of, well, we don't want much change.
Yeah. So thank you for that observation. I called it the war room, so to speak, but it was intentional. Capital goes where capital's welcome. And if someone has capital and they want to do something here, we want to roll out the red carpet, so to speak. We had a whole room, it was a 20-person conference room, full AV setup. We had all the posters, our vision from our comprehensive plan that we just redid, our strategic plan that was formulated by our residents. And that is the asset, right? The strategic plan, the 120 residents that said, this is what we want. We want a vibrant community with plenty of things to do, plenty of private businesses, and a lot of residents in order to keep those businesses there and vibrant, thrive. Okay, that's what your goal is. Now it's my job to make sure that goal turns into a reality. And that helped both attracting developers, but it also helped reminding residents, you want this change. This is what you want. This is what you continuously vote for. Because I wasn't quiet about it, and I kept getting reelected. So did the council, like specific councilors. And that helped move things forward in a really rapid amount of time. But we did identify, to start, we identified that we had some issues in Auburn, not unlike a lot of other people. But we also identified what the economic patterns are that surround spheres of influence, let's say. Boston to Portsmouth, Portsmouth to Portland. And we started looking at that and we're like, okay, now that Portland sphere is going to now move up to Lewiston and Auburn and Augusta, right? And the coastal area a bit, but they're kind of hemmed in by the ocean. So understanding demographics, understanding past case studies, and then saying, okay, we have an opportunity here to get ahead of the curve, okay? And we did. We started in 2018, 2019. COVID hit. We kept on going. And we knew this was an opportunity, okay, that we could then utilize as people, more folks, as we have now seen, started moving to Maine from other parts of the country, started getting priced out of the greater Portland marketplace. And then, looking for alternatives, we wanted to be the alternative. We also had the hard conversation saying that it was okay for Auburn, which has a wonderful economic mix from light to heavy manufacturing, commercial, service industry, and residential. It's okay if Auburn is a bedroom community for the greater Portland area. It's perfectly fine. We have great infrastructure. It's already there. We had a lot of residents already working in Portland, living in Auburn. So we knew it was doable, right? So we launched marketing campaigns. Auburn, we're closer than you think. We started launching events from New Year's Eve Auburn to our Lobster Festival, which has been going on for years now. It's still going on even after since I've left the office. The Blues Festival, but we advertised, and our sesquicentennial, our 150th anniversary, we were the first municipality in Maine, we believe history, to literally buy TV commercials. Advertising these events. And what's great about Auburn, and we're closer than you think, and we hit Southern Maine and Central Maine's TV markets heavy. And people, they stood up. They've never seen anything like this. They're like, wait a second, Auburn is there. We're there. It's playing, and it's playing hard. And boom, we just saw record-setting growth. New construction, all market rate, apartments, homes, duplexes, the entire housing ecosystem. And when that came, so did more economic base in the commercial sector.
Right.
From an Olive Garden, which happened as soon as we were literally the first municipality in Maine and one of the first in New England to get rid of commercial parking requirements.
Oh, really?
The day after we did that, we had Olive Garden announce they were building a new restaurant because they knew what was best for them. Municipality ordinance did not know how many spaces they needed.
Right.
But they did.
Right.
And they needed 5 less spaces than what we mandated. So once we got rid of the mandate, they're in.
Yeah.
And they've been going on 3 years now.
So you were really trying to change at the local level, what has been attempted to be done by the state, which is to kind of change this unseen hand of zoning. There are a lot of people that tomorrow would say, I want to move forward with this, and then they don't because the zoning doesn't allow for it. And that could be, thou shalt have X number of parking spaces or whatever. We've talked a lot about it on this show, and we will continue to, because there is a lack of awareness around how what's in codes prevents things from happening, even when the money is lined up and you have well-intentioned people that are hardworking, but in black and white it says you need 10 spots and there's only room for 8, so everybody just goes home.
Right. And this affects every level of society. From your neighbor that wants to rebuild a porch, but because the setbacks have been changed since that house was built in the 50s or 60s, they can't rebuild their porch. Well, what's going to happen to the value of their home? It's going to deteriorate. They lose hope.
This is a really good conversation for a guy like you because it always comes up against local control. And so here you are, the executive director, if you will, of the organization called the Auburn Municipality, and you're the CEO for a time as mayor, just kind of playing this role. How do you feel when the state says, or would you feel, I guess, or other members of Mayor's Coalition, when the state says, thou shalt allow 2 units per every single family lot, or thou shalt do this? I mean, it feels heavy-handed on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like without people being forward-thinking like you were, like in the 400 plus other municipalities, then nothing happens.
So you're specifically talking about LD 2003 a couple years ago.
But also just broader, like, obviously you're out of the role of being mayor now, but do you think that the state needs to do that, or do we need to spend more time just like hoping and praying that people win mayor that have vision, like with what you had?
Well, first of all, hope isn't a strategy.
Right.
I think local control in many ways is very good. It defines us. It defines New England.
Sure.
But in many ways, it's causing the problems that we're having.
Yeah.
Because being elected to a local office turns into a popularity contest versus turning into getting something done. And that is a huge stumbling block. One of the main causes of a lot of our ills, from the commercial manufacturing side to residential development and housing. And housing does matter. And everything that happened a couple years ago, the legislation LD 2003, they used Auburn as a template because we already did it.
Right.
And the effects were unbelievable. I mean, we were listed the yimbiest city in America by George Mason University. And they did a huge profile on us.
Yes, in my backyard, for people that don't know.
Yes, in my backyard. Yeah. And it's not, it's the counterweight to no in my backyard, or NIMBYism.
Right.
But it's really, yes, in my backyard it should be, though it doesn't flow off the tongue, yes, in my neighbor's backyard. Okay? Because if you don't want to do something in your backyard, don't. But if your neighbor wants to build a small ADU so his mother-in-law, God bless him or her for that, can live there on site in their own private space, or their child coming back from college needs a place to land for a couple of years back in the neighborhood they grew up in, awesome, go for it. Thank you for doing so. Why should I stop you? Why should the city tell you how big or how small it should be? Why? It's your land.
Yeah.
So we changed all of our ordinances. The vast majority of them, I should say. And we worked from the inside of the city out. But we took what was old and made it new again. So this is what built Maine in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, was this lack of municipal oversight. If you look at your downtown, really mature neighborhoods, they're all built within 10 feet of the road.
Right.
They all have small yards. They have less than 100 feet of road frontage.
Yeah.
So we looked at that archetype that was so successful, and we just went back to what it was.
Right.
And now it's still successful. I mean, it's truly the way to go. Now, the state getting involved, here's my problem. The state has caused a lot of our issues. The state can't get it out of its own way. And in a truly bipartisan fashion, by the way. And municipalities won't do it either, because what happens is if you do these things, you cause change, and people are afraid of change, and you're out of a job. And if you're more worried about being a municipal leader than actually doing the right thing, you probably shouldn't have had the job in the first place.
Right. Amen.
Yeah.
I love that. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that in a little bit later, in terms of, zoning and impacts and so forth. But I want to shift, you went from military to the private sector in terms of marketing and sold that company. And more recently, you've made an intentional focus on real estate development by acquiring an historic property in downtown Lewiston, along with a 590-bay parking garage, and kind of in the midst right now of doing a 300-plus unit development, mixed-use development, primarily housing down there. Why the shift from marketing to development?
It is a little bit of a shift, but a lot of the core principles are still the same. Right?
Sure.
Managing a company, managing individuals, managing tasks, subcontractors, what have you. So there's a lot of similarities there, but it's really satisfying a need. That's the biggest similarity. A marketing need is providing a service to a company who can't provide that service themselves. We need housing. We need people. Bottom line, we need people. I like to compare us with New Hampshire. If we had the population density that New Hampshire has, and no one can say New Hampshire is overflowing with people. Maine would have 4.5 million people right now. Auburn would have 80,000 people.
That's an interesting stat, and it's only not that way because of lack of housing, really.
It's a lack of housing. It's a lack of opportunities. And the cart and the horse really come into play here too. We will have more opportunities when we have more people.
Yeah.
Auburn is a great example of that. New Target, Olive Garden, Procter & Gamble has expanded 3 times, just since I started being mayor, because there was more people. The more units we built, the more commercial activity we had, the more opportunities we had for existing residents to enjoy restaurants, shops, and so forth. More impacts with their schools. We got a brand new high school because we're having, a population bump. So which didn't raise taxes, by the way. That's a misnomer. Oh, the more kids you have, the higher taxes are going to be. Well, you need kids. If you don't have kids, you won't have a community. So it is. There's a lot of similarities there, but honestly, we need market rate housing in Lewiston and Auburn. We need it everywhere. Augusta as well, Portland, so forth. But we need people. Because at the end of the day, government's not going to solve the problems. Right. People are going to solve the problem. Right. And if we crowdsource this with a diverse, young population, we're going to have a better outcome. Yeah. And that's what we need as a community. Because at the end of the day, I live in Auburn. I work in Lewiston. It's intermingled, commingled, if you would. Sure. I have a vested interest in making sure that my kids come back here. Yeah. And I want them to have that vibrancy so they want to come back here. Yeah. So that's really the reason I'm doing it.
Well, and also, too, to me, it seems like on the development side, there's a huge marketing component. I mean, you have to basically put together your story and it has to be told and shared, that story, with people who want to make an investment, whether that's a lender or straight up investment, community, or a mix of both. So it seems to me there is a big marketing component tied into that as well.
No, there is. And that will really come forward, once construction starts and we start pre-leasing activities, which are critical. You have to build awareness. You have to start educating people about what the opportunities are, what their options are as they're moving to downsize, as they're moving to, they've lived in the same place for a few years and they're ready to move up, or they want a different community, or they're starting a family. All those things you need to be brought forth, and that's how you tell the story. And then you target your audience, and you make sure that audience hears that story.
Just a random thought, take it or leave it, but I find that when I'm trying to fill apartments, like 3/4 of the applicants have pets. And where you're building two separate buildings, it's almost like you could have a pet building and a not pet building. Yeah. I bet the pet building would be full 100% of the time.
That's something I've started to think about, and it is very popular to have a pet, and I've got pets.
Put in a couple of dog washing stations in there. The cat hangout room.
Absolutely, and I'm a lab guy, and it's something that we'll think about. There's pros and cons to it.
For sure. Well, it's interesting because there's a lot too, even before you get done or in construction and you're going with your project. Before that, you've got to pitch, the city council. In this case, Lewiston was on board with creating a TIF district for your project. And there's discussions going to try to make, everything economically viable. It seems like they, as a community, are interested in playing ball and trying to work on getting things to happen there. But a lot of that is being driven by you as the developer, saying, hey, this is what we need, here's the information, kind of essentially putting together the marketing package even for them.
I'm a little torn right now. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, Matt, and part of me wants to agree with you and sing the praises of Lewiston. The other part wants me to keep it a secret. Because I don't want anyone else to know. But I'll get past that part. And I will say this. Lewiston as a partner is phenomenal. Their staff they're experienced, they're mature, they're pragmatic, they get it, they understand the nuances, they understand the economic multiplier that new residential is going to bring to the downtown, and a lot of different points. So I don't have to convince them. They already know. Okay, and then they want it. So it's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. And it's not just me, with Lewis, but I've seen that happen with other developers. There's been a seismic shift in the way that Lewiston staff and the majority of their counselors have actually, changed their mentality about development. They get it. And I wish more communities were like that. I will say Lewiston, in my mind, right now is probably the best economic investment opportunity in Maine. Probably followed very closely by Augusta too. There's a lot of similarities there. I'm not as well versed in Augusta, inner workings and council. I haven't done anything up here, though my wife's from this area. Sure. Proud Coney Ram. But that is the talk. And part of it's a little sad because it used to be Auburn. For years.
Oh, it did? I didn't know that.
Well, Auburn used to be like, hey, what's Auburn doing?
Oh, right. Yes, you're right. Just I thought you meant Lewiston and Auburn were just called Auburn, and then it's
no. And so Auburn was the talk, and now it's not. And, now it's Westbrook, and the former mayor of Westbrook, Mike Foley, is still a very good friend of mine. We used to compete back and forth for development. It's like not for the same project, but it's how big are we growing? If I remember correctly, I had a wager with a certain councilwoman from Augusta
Oh
on.
yeah, my wife.
Yeah, I did. I think I won. I think she owes me something. I think it was $5 and lunch at Kushnock, right?
Well, we got the lunch covered today,
You
so
did,
maybe
you
we're
did.
even, Steven.
Yeah.
I'll tell her she owes me now.
But they did well. She gave me a good run. I pulled
Yeah.
away in the last final stretch.
Well, yeah, you guys have been, I mean, it's amazing to see what's going on. And frankly, like, we could fill in the name of so many communities across the U.S., anybody listening to this, where so much of the activity in areas where there isn't a giant, economic driver, i.e. like Tesla just dropped a giga plant. So now we're going to build 500 units around there because, that's a no-brainer. I mean, the case needs to be made for so many municipalities as to why here and somewhere else where people can pretty much pack up their computer, get in their car, and go where they want to go to live.
Yeah.
And we live in this kind of digital nomad economy now where people can choose quality of life and places to be, work from home. So these communities, Lewiston, Auburn, Augusta, all had similar foundations. What? We use the river to create energy to make things. Now we don't do that. It's been shipped off elsewhere. And so there's this renaissance occurring like, well, we have all this infrastructure. What do we have that we can build upon? A lot of it's the natural beauty and so forth. And also, too, you have employment base there in the Lewiston, Auburn area. Augusta or these other communities generally have something. I mean, you're not, it's hard to bring back like a Rumford, for instance, because they're trying, but it's much harder when you're further away like that. But this is a common issue, and I'm finding a lot of it is local leaders coming to the table saying this is a priority for us. And Augusta, recently has done that, and we're starting to see kind of the fruits of that labor come because developers, well, you're one, like if you're fully immersed in this project in Lewiston and let's say it's done in 28, you're looking for another project. If every news article is like, it's really hard to do business here, why even pick up the phone to look for a site in that area to start a project when you're just going to be up against it the whole time, right?
And for the record, July and August of 27. I don't want people waiting an extra year in order to to lease. But yeah, it's you bring up so much. I think what you said earlier was a river, right? Mm-hmm. We use the rivers to produce energy to run the mills. Mm-hmm. Now we have to use the rivers to produce energy to run our lives. Mm-hmm. That internal energy, that drive that entrepreneurs need, doctors, lawyers, electricians, what have you, right? They should be focused on something that wasn't really focused on, and economic base is happening. It's going to come. There's a lot of things that Augusta can do if they get through the partisan bickering on both sides. Yeah. And look at what unites them and what should be a bipartisan issue. Housing is bipartisan. I was talking to a representative today, and I'm a Republican. Yeah, no problem. She's a Republican, and we're talking, and I said, housing, we're letting the Democrats kind of go in there and own that topic. I go, this is something that should bring you together. I go, look at Montana. Probably the gold standard in ordinance reform at the state level, initiated by a Republican House, confirmed by a Republican Senate, signed into law by a Republican governor. Absolutely. Fine. Okay, get in there, work with them. I go, we all have the same mission. And what we need to realize is a Republican tenet, if you would, which is removing the bureaucracy that lives in Augusta as well as the local municipalities. Right. There are so many things that need to be tackled that people are afraid to tackle in Augusta that they can fix right now. The whole fundamental difference in the cost of construction and hence the cost of housing. Yeah. They really need to get
there's a bill before the legislature right now, which will be voted on by the time people hear this and we'll know what happened. But it's LD 1829 and it's Speaker Fecto's bill. He's a Democrat. He's been on this podcast. It has a number of really robust changes in it. Like, for instance, you don't have to go get a subdivision approval until you get to 5 lots instead of 3. Some people might be like, well, why does that matter? Well, because a multifamily building oftentimes is considered as a subdivision. So if you can get an FHA loan for a 4-unit building, you could go in, take a 3-unit, turn it into a 4-unit if this changes without going to subdivision approval. But currently right now you'd have to go to subdivision approval, which slows things down.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Let's talk about subdivision approvals.
Yeah.
It's a great topic. Okay, subdivision approval has to go in front of the planning board. Oh, planning boards. Okay. We need to get rid of planning boards because they're not planning.
Right.
You literally are standing trial as a developer, as a regular person. And by the way, people say developers. if you have ever built your own home, hired someone to build a home for you, or added on to your home, you are a developer. It is a low barrier of entry for this
I would
title.
say even built a birdhouse or developer.
Yes,
for
you're a
bird.
developer.
Yeah.
You are a developer. A big birdhouse, but still a birdhouse. So
For big bird or just for
no, a
like
bigger birdhouse
Okay.
for smaller birds. I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife's the bird expert, so not me. But I have a lot of birdhouses. But so people think that developers are evil. They're not evil. They're just regular people like us. But you look at this. You look at these planning boards. You look at why Fecto's bill is so important. It's because planning boards have become politicized. They're boards that a developer will walk into and they're automatically guilty as they walk into the room, and they have to prove their innocence. And that's how the planning boards treat developers. And you have to ask yourself, why are they guilty because they want to build homes for people? Why are they guilty because they want to add value and tax dollars to your community? Why are they guilty because they believe in that community so much they want to invest their money here? That doesn't sound like a guilty person.
No.
So all of a sudden, a planning board is making you prove yeses, making you prove that you have good intent. Just being there in the room is good intent enough. The planning board has, by state law, a certain set of findings of fact that they need to demonstrate to say no to a project. Stick to that. Don't interject all sorts of wild speculative things of what could or could not happen. This happened in Auburn last week. Okay, it was horrible. This developer spent years trying to get a great project off the ground. He did. And then a year elapsed before he could get the financing done because interest rates were high, as we know. So he had to go in front of the planning board again. But the planning board changed. None of the ordinances changed. None of the regulations changed. Nothing in the project changed. But there is new political appointed planning board members who did not want growth because the neighbors said, it's not our land, but we walk through that land. So it's ours now. Well, no, it's not. Okay. It's not your land. You're in a residential neighborhood. You don't want more residences built. Okay. They listened to those individuals and they made up amazingly wild accusations and finding facts and developed their own types of studies that needed to be conducted on top of the Army Corps of Engineers saying yes and the EPA saying yes and ordinance saying yes. Everything was approved. It should have been a very simple extension for 1 year now that interest rates are lower, but it wasn't. They killed the project through regulatory burdensome red tape. That's not fair.
No.
Do you think this developer is going to do anything else in Auburn? No.
It's so hard for people to understand that side of it because development is not something we learn about in school. It's not like a profession that people say, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be a developer, usually. It's something that, attorneys, business owners, people kind of go and get drawn into, right? It's a very complex thing to do, but it's fun. It's like putting together a very sophisticated puzzle. And when you do, you have a great picture.
It should be. Planning board is now... talk about truth in advertising. It's not truthful.
Right.
Look at your planning boards around the state. How many of them actually do planning?
Yep. No.
It's turned into some sort of judicial, if you would, courtroom, a lower house of a city council, and another wall against development and growth. That's what it's turned into.
Right.
I don't see planning boards doing planning.
No, I mean, they're supposed to be using the comprehensive plan to make sure that it aligns with and that doesn't happen. So
I think you could just push it into an AI. You should have a planning board app, AI rather, and you put in the requirements, you put in the project, and is it approved?
green box,
Yes or not?
yeah, green check or red X.
That's it. No politics involved at all.
Yeah.
But
No,
anyways.
I agree with you. And this is, I think, it's starting to come to head now because people are starting to realize, yeah, because of the way that this is set up, we're at odds with actually being able to have this occur.
Yeah.
And I mean, that project example is unfortunate because there's a lot of money that goes into getting to that point. And often what happens is these folks who are developers that are normal people like us, just trying to kind of get something going forward, they end up just packing up their bags and leaving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then nothing happens.
Absolutely. People talk about these horrible out-of-state developers in Auburn. Out of the 1,500 units that were approved when I was mayor, and hence most of them have been built already, only 110 were owned by someone outside of Androscoggin County. They're all local people. A local woman had an idea, a vision to build beautiful market rate housing in an old downtown field that was just in disarray. She got pushback, fights, death threats, but she did it.
Oh, wow.
And now they're full, they're beautiful, they're great, and she's super successful.
That's
I'm
a
very
great
proud of her.
segue into the next thing I want to talk about, because the project that you're working on, which is, I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that this would be, I believe, the largest market rate development in Central Maine in a long time.
A generation, yeah.
Yeah. And it's all market rate. You're not seeking, some kind of LIHTC credit or something through the state or whatever. You're putting together traditional funding sources and going to work. What is your, I would imagine that some people are looking at that and like, wow, he's crazy. Lewiston, why would 300 units? I mean, but you've done a ton of analysis and identified that there's a huge need. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's a massive need, and people are. This happens all over the country. They're focused on average incomes of residents. They need to be focused on average wages of employers. That is the number that is very hard to quantify.
What do you mean different about that?
So what we've seen in Lewiston is and Auburn and a lot of other communities is old housing stock, undervalued, deferred maintenance. It's not really strong housing stock. But then again, you have local employers, hospitals, colleges, Bates College, for example, Central Maine Medical Center, St. Mary's, Procter & Gamble. There's a lot of businesses that pay extremely well. Those individuals, because there's no housing in the community they work in, go to outlying communities. Mine at Maine, one of the highest average incomes in Maine.
Really?
Oh, yeah, one of the highest, if not the highest, actually, I think in Androscoggin County, roughly $85,000 to $90,000 a year.
Really?
The only
In
business in Minot, Maine is Minot Country Store. Great Italians, good sales on Tuesdays, but not paying that well, and they don't have 1,500 employees.
Yeah.
Where are they living? Or excuse me, where are they working?
In Lewiston and Auburn. Yeah.
Lewiston's average income is around $45,000.
So what you're saying is field of dreams, build it, they will come, but it's not a dream, and
They're already
true.
there.
They're there.
They're just there. They're just driving a long way.
They're like, hey, they're driving a lot further than they really want to.
So that's one aspect. Then you got to look at the fact that there's a lot of folks that want to downsize, and there's no place to downsize. And these are active retirees.
We see this every day.
Every day. They don't want to go into your typical senior residential housing that's assisted living or anything. They're like, no, I run and travel and have a great time, right? They're active retirees.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm one of those at 75 or 80. But they love to get into a nice urban, downtown, amenity-rich, technologically advanced unit that's small enough or large enough for their needs, but allows them the freedom of mobility. Now, they're going to sell their house. Then you're going to get a young family. Or you're going to get the couple on floor 2 who met 6 months ago.
Right.
And now they're in love, and they're getting married, and they're going to have kids, but they're not going to do it in that apartment building.
Right.
But since Mrs. Jones just moved up to the 4th floor,
Right.
they're going to buy Mrs. Jones' house.
Right. Exactly.
And there we go.
Right.
Okay, and now we have more room for Mrs. Jones' grandkids who are just entering the workforce
Right.
to come and have a place to start.
Foundational housing. Yes, sadly, a lot of the housing that's been created in recent years has only been made possible due to certain funding sources, which then restrict who the tenant can be and all this kind of stuff. And you lose that whole liquidity, if you will, in the market that you just described, because it's like, well, that apartment's perfect for me, but I make $1,300 a month, and that says if I'm above $1,170, I can't rent it, which is dumb. But I understand the reasons. We don't have to get into it. But what you're doing is you're just saying, hey, come as you are.
Come as you
We've made the housing. You want this. This is the range from, 1,600 to 2,200. And you pick what works for you.
Furnished, unfurnished, a
Right.
studio, because you're a single guy in your 20s.
Right.
Okay, and you don't need much. You just want a place to sleep, eat, hang out, watch TV, and then you're off. You're working. You're going out to the local establishments. You're being social.
Yeah.
To the 2 bedrooms, because Mrs. Jones wants to have a place, for her kids and grandkids to come and visit. Yeah, absolutely, and have a place to stay.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things, but you do need that housing ecosystem. You do need market rate is not a bad thing.
Right.
And it really gets under my skin when people are like, "Oh, well, these units aren't affordable." Well, they're affordable for someone, and we have to stop demonizing people who go to school, get good careers, work hard, okay, and make good money. If you make good money, you can have nice things. That's absolutely, it should be common accepted knowledge. So no more demonizing people. It is affordable. Nobody would be building market rate housing if nobody could afford it.
Right, exactly. The people are there. And also, you have like a situation where if additional housing doesn't get built, prices continue to go up because
Absolutely.
the population of this country as a whole is continuing to grow. And actually Maine's population is increasing as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is among retirees, people migrating here that aren't working anymore. So we got to try to offset that with the 20-something that you talked about that's still in the labor force. I'm curious, what really you think are some of the bigger barriers. We talked a little bit about planning board, obviously, is one of them. What else comes to mind in terms of barriers to development? And the reason why I like to talk about this on the podcast is so that people that are listening can say, hey, I'd like to be a part of maybe trying to affect change on that front or doing something to spread the gospel, if you will, about making it better.
Well, we have to look at what we have as institutional kind of norms, not just local ordinances, state laws, but norms. Everything from planning board approvals and subdivisions, but we have to look at building codes. We got to look at the fairness in there. And I think if everybody looked at everything and said, "Wait a second, is this fair or not fair?" MUBEC, right? The main it's a new acronym.
Uniform Building and Energy Code.
Thank you. That one. Oh my gosh, don't we have issues with that? So if you have a 3-unit and you want to add a 4th unit onto your building, let's say a row house, for example, you can't until you sprinkle the entire building, not just a 4th unit, but the entire building.
Right.
Wait, cost prohibitive, can't do it, so it never happens.
Right.
But if that same building was in Minot, Maine, or in a municipality of the population less than, I think 55?
Yeah.
5,500?
Yeah.
You could do it.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Minot, Maine has a volunteer fire department. You don't have to sprinkle a building there, but in Auburn, with a response time and a professional fire department of 3 minutes, you have to sprinkle it here? Well, why is that? Why are we having this arbitrary number, saying these communities have to and these communities don't have to?
Well, when I talk to the fire marshal, it's interesting because every one of these points make 100% sense. And then you talk to someone in the midst and they're like, well, it has to be that way. Why sprinklers for a 4-unit building? Well, it's so that people can get out because, there's more people in that structure. I'm like, how many old farmhouses are there in Maine where the husband and wife, decided they wanted to have a lot of kids? They got 7 kids, the 2 of them's 9 people living in that building. That has to be sprinkled to ensure that they can all get out. I mean, there's just no rhyme or reason to it. And they're not trying to save the building even. They admit that. They're just trying to let people to get out. It's like...
That, and you look at that, I mean, first of all, gotta love our firemen and firewomen.
Sure.
Okay, fire professionals are great. Fire marshal's office in Augusta needs to be looked at and scrutinized extremely hard.
Yeah.
Why? Because you can't protect people from every eventuality. It's just impossible.
Right.
I'll give you an example is hallways and 2 forms of egress in a commercial apartment building. There is no studies. There's no case law. There's nothing that says 2 means of egress connected by a centralized hallway will prevent or minimize deaths or injuries during a fire. And these are buildings that are sprinkled. It doesn't. You go to Europe, and there is a centralized stairwell on buildings up to 18 or 20 some odd units, and it's less space, it's easier, it's more light, it's healthier space. You have better units with more corners, more windows, and there's no issue.
Right.
Okay, so then they've been around a lot longer than we have. No issues there, but issues here? No, there's something that's wrong. And the International Building Code, it's not international. We're the only country that has it. There's a reason. It's, again, talk about truth and naming convention, right? So there's a lot of things that need to happen. That's one. Mandatory parking, there's so much that can happen at the state level. Let's get back to that. And people need to look at the local. They need to look at the state. They need to talk with their state representatives. And they need to ask some hard questions. It's like, why is this? Why are we held to a different standard than another community? Snow loads. Why are snow loads different based upon county versus based upon geological and meteorological realities?
Right.
Is there a difference between, let's say New Gloucester in Cumberland County that shares a border with Auburn and Androscoggin County? Is there a massive change on this arbitrary county line? No.
The snow stops on the county lines, don't you know, Jason?
I didn't. I might have been sick that day in meteorological school. But it's just we've over-regulated, we've over-policed. We are trying to protect ourselves from ourselves.
Sure.
And that is really the underlying thing in a lot of topics, I think, and especially housing, planning boards. We're trying to protect our people from people. Well, let's talk about people. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about where ordinances really came from. Let's talk about redlining.
Yeah.
Let's talk about segregation.
Yeah, racism.
Let's talk about keeping the Irish, the Jews, and the French Catholics on one side of the bridge while the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants are on the other side.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that. Oh, it's literally written in our old ordinances.
Right.
Not until the 70s and 80s did some of those redlining bans or prohibitions in HOAs become illegal. I think it was 1977. Up until then, you could have housing developments that didn't allow Irish. Imagine that. That's in our lifetime.
Right.
Yeah, so, you have to look at where everything was coming from. Ordinances were designed initially to keep people away from people. And then they changed the marketing on it. Ordinances are designed to keep bad industries away from people.
And keep you safe.
And keep you safe. But now, is it? I want a factory over on one side and a house on the other side of something, a space, divided, separate. Okay, that's great. We all can get behind that. But when we use ordinances to act as a litmus test to only allow certain types of people in your neighborhood, then you're assuming ownership of the neighborhood and not your property. You didn't buy the neighborhood. You bought into it, but you did not buy it. It's not yours per se.
Right.
So that's what we really have those conversations. To answer your question, maybe after a long-winded approach, ask your representatives at the local and state level, at the federal level, what are you doing to prevent people, or prevent municipalities or the state from being discriminatory in their laws and ordinances?
Yeah, this kind of brings it full circle because I remember when we were working to make some changes at the state level, a lot of my Republican colleagues would say to me, well, Maine is a local control state. We can't mess with that. And my kind of response was always the same, which was last time I checked, we were trying to keep government out of people's lives as much as possible, at least, from our point of view in our caucus, Republican caucus. And it's like, that is government. It's just government closer to the people, which is great. We want that so that people are part of the process. But it's still government telling you you can't do this with your property. The things that you want to do that you can demonstrate is safe and is going to be better economically, and why does it matter what level it's at? It's still stepping in and messing up the free market economy from basically saying, hey, the best thing on this site is 10 units and we can fit it, and there's a bus thing in front, so they'll ride the bus if they want to live here. That's just the way it's going to be. And then the people that go to that place are ones for whom that works for them.
Let the market decide.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We should be building units that don't have parking.
Right.
We should allow that.
And there's some towns like Rockland, I think, for instance, just recently started that. But why build buildings for cars when we are trying to build buildings for humans?
It comes down to walkable neighborhoods. Everybody talks about walkability.
Which your project's going to have.
We'll have great walkability, yeah. And we have an existing.
Right in downtown.
Absolutely. It'd be great. Walkability is going to be high. That index is going to be off the charts. But you talk about, okay, well, we want a walkable community, but we want to have plenty of parking. And we want public transport. It's like, whoa. 2 out of 3. You can only have 2 out of 3. If you want a walkable community, that means we're building on parking lots. Okay? But that will get you public transport. Great. Well, if you want a parkable community, it's not going to be walkable because you're going to have parking lots everywhere. But you can have public transport if you want to use it. So you can't have all 3. All right? Pick 2 and stick to it. But allow people, developers, to build something that is catering to a walkable community or a community that wants transportation. God knows our transportation here is completely underutilized. We keep talking about adding more. Why? We've built a community, we built a state around cars. So we don't need the levels of public transport. But these are harsh truths, and everybody will say no. Recycling is another great example, a little off housing. But we did an analysis of recycling. 8% of Auburn residents were recycling. That's low. Well, how do we get it up? Wait, do we want to get it up? Then we looked at the fact that the people who were picking up or recycling, it wasn't being recycled. There was no market for the commodity. So they're just trucking it to a landfill in Old Town or Orono.
And people were thinking they were recycling.
They
were
felt
just
good.
throwing them away.
So we're like, well, we're going to stop recycling because it costs us 3 times more to recycle than it does to just put it into our energy-efficient waste-to-energy plant in Auburn, which converts it to electricity. And oh my gosh, it was like we were kicking the neighbor's dog. They're so emotionally attached to something, they couldn't see reality. They were disconnected. They wanted to save the feeling that they were doing well, even though they were doing worse for the environment. Hard truths. Once we can have those conversations in Augusta and your local city hall, we'll be a better state.
I think it's interesting, though, the perspective that you bring to this discussion, particularly with your company now, Aegean Development, which I assume is named after the Aegean Sea.
Yeah.
Greek guy.
Good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I can
a pretty
keep up
sea.
with that one, okay?
Yeah.
I
And
missed it with the
Gulf
Argo,
of Maine
but I
was
got
picked.
Aegean.
Yeah, someone already chose
Someone
Gulf
already
of
had
Maine.
Gulf
so,
of Maine,
yeah,
and there was no Gulf of America at the time, so
There wasn't.
skip that. Now that's a thing.
It's a great
So-
idea, actually.
So what's the future look like for Aegean besides, occasional trips to Greece?
Yes. We got to get down to roots. No, really, I mean, the future is a kind of motto that I have, if you would, and stay loose, stay nimble, and keep your eyes open and read everything you can read, talk to everyone you can talk with, and find out where the next opportunity is. It might be in Lewiston, might be in Augusta. I don't know. Might be building housing. It might be building, an automobile plant. Who knows? But whatever it is, I want to be ready to do it. And I want to make sure I'm the first one or the second one. Second one's usually best. It's easier that way.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be third of the game, So I'm pretty happy, and I can speak to you about our project in Lewiston because, I'm the first one to do this. I won't be the last.
Right.
But I'd rather be the first. It's more difficult, but it's going to be more satisfying.
Well, in some respects, there was some work done to kind of break in a little bit with the mill conversions and stuff.
Absolutely.
But nobody's taken a parking lot that's just a flat surface and gone up with vertically, 6 stories with 2 buildings to create 300 new units of housing in that community. And I mean, the amount of publicity that will come of that, which will be good for Maine because other developers need to be brought to the table to build the 84,000. I mean, you and I could do this every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we're just going to be barely cracking the surface. So really, in order for us to get to the GDP that it's robust enough, we need the people here to take the jobs to grow the GDP. And so hopefully that story will get out to the world that, hey, Maine is a great place to do business, and also to the employers, getting them to say, hey, look, seems like you guys can put together housing quickly for us, and there's quite a few people living there. Maybe we'll take some units and get stuff built.
Well, even the future employers that aren't here. When you're looking at relocating to a space, there's a couple things you're looking for, okay?
Yeah,
and
you can speak to this because you've done it.
I've done it many times, right? And I've worked with other companies who specialize in this. They look for vibrancy in the workforce. They look for a younger workforce. So let's say, real world, Procter & Gamble. Little do people realize Auburn is the Western Hemisphere's #1 producer of feminine hygiene products.
Really?
We own it. We're going to change a mascot.
Never
I wanted to
going
change
out
a
of
seal.
business.
I wanted to change a seal from a shoe to a tampon. Got a lot of pushback on that, but it's true. They employ hundreds and hundreds of people. Amazing wages and benefits. It's Procter & Gamble.
Yeah.
They've added a couple $100 million new value to our city just in the last couple of years. So anyways, you don't grow a business or start a business in an area that has an old population, that isn't building housing, that isn't maintaining their infrastructure. You look for those things. That's why Target opened up in Auburn, because we hit those boxes. That's why a lot of other businesses are looking or opening up in Auburn, because we hit those boxes. Lewiston, same way. Lewiston has the youngest population in Maine. That's a huge attraction. We get more people, then we're going to get more commerce. More commerce, lower taxes. So that's a beautiful economic ecosystem, circle of life, if you would. So it's critical that we start doing this across the board.
Yeah. And it seems like in Maine it's a little bit different because there's a community that wants these, we say this, we want these things. At least we tell people it's what we want. Then it comes to the brass tacks of the planning board meetings and the like at Al. But, at large, the community really does come around and support things in a way that you don't often see in other parts of the country. There's almost this kind of ethos of like, yes, we're ruggedly independent in Maine, but we'll also stop to help you out. Like, we're not going to walk by you and kick you while you're down, usually. And so sometimes that happens here. But, it seems like the community is good. And what we struggle with is more just kind of our aging population, lack of tradespeople, things on this front, not, oh, it's not a place I want to live because it's unsafe or undesirable.
I would my pleading to the baby boomers. You had your turn, okay, and in every aspect of our lives, from politics to, business to whatever, and you did well. Thank you, okay? Now, please let us do well.
Yeah.
It's Gen X, it's millennials, it's our turn now.
Yeah.
We're thinking and planning for our future that we're going to be alive in.
Oh, I thought you were a baby boomer.
Wow, this interview's over. No, much younger than that. I got barely more hair than you.
We should have started with the more laughs in the beginning.
We should have.
But,
I know. Everybody's turned off by now. But no, we should. Baby boomers, they keep wanting
No, it's
to.
true. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at a piece
Yeah.
of land the other day, man, and the site designer's like, "What are you looking at this piece of land for?" And I'm like, "Well, we can get something here." He's like, "It's gonna be awful hard." And I looked at him, and he's a baby boomer, and I'm like, "Well, the baby boomers took all the easy to develop land,
Yeah. And then they made rules. Here's a kicker.
Then they made rules about what you couldn't do with the rest of it.
And then what happened then? Artificial scarcity.
Yeah.
So now their homes that they own free and clear
Yeah.
because they're denying future housing, their values are going through the roof.
Yeah.
And they're going to hit a point where they're going to make $700,000-800,000 in tax free, pretty much with cap gains laws, profit off their home and move to Florida.
Yeah.
While we're sitting here holding the bag on our future.
Yeah.
So great. Thank you. We've got baby boomers all throughout government, local and state level, that I honestly believe are making and perpetrating ordinances and perpetuating rather ordinances and local laws and state laws in order to maintain or increase rapidly the value of their own home. That is really the new definition of graph.
Amen, brother. And
Yeah.
you know what, though? It flies under the radar of, well, we're just doing, what the ordinance says.
What you're doing is you're protecting and enhancing the value of your home in order to profit off it at the expense of the other generations, okay, that are coming in after you.
Yeah.
That is a crime. So boomers, I love you. Love you, Graham. Love you, Mom.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, it's not about you anymore.
Right.
Okay?
I think ultimately, I just really can't wait to see these two buildings come out of the ground in Lewiston, and then what happens next after that.
You're going to have to do a remote podcast right there during the groundbreaking.
We will.
Okay, and we'll give you a little tour later on.
Yeah.
So as we get some walls up, that should all be happening over the course of 26. It'll be an exciting year.
Well, I'm really excited that you're doing this because I know when you started the project, it was like, well, we'll get it all permitted and approved, and maybe someone else will do it. And then it became clear in that process, like, it's a no-brainer for us to do it, you know?
That's true.
And now it's going to happen. So
Yeah,
I'm
we're
excited.
excited. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today, Jason, and talking about the real issues that impact housing and more. And I wish you all the best in future years. Anybody that wants to learn more about what you're doing, where can they check it out?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know. We don't have a website yet. That's next on my list, but it will come soon.
Yeah.
I would just follow the news. It will happen.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be loftsonlowell.net right now, I think, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
Give me a couple more months.
You got it. Well, Jason, thanks again for joining us. And
No, thank you, man.
thanks, everyone, for listening.